We're back to Authors Corner on the Total Education Network. Again, totaltutor.net for more information. Twitter, Total Tutor, Neil S. Haley, Facebook. Again, the Simply G Media Network, Authors Corner. And I'm just always excited about our partnership now with Triumph Books. Just amazing authors, unbelievable. I have conversations with them, and they're like, "Do you have a sports background, Neil?" I said, "No. I mean, I was a huge sports fan, and then kind of 4 kids later have really. I guess that there's certain times that I really don't know what's going on in sports, but at certain times for sure." But I want to welcome the program author, Dan Brown, 100 Things the 49ers fans should know and do before they die. What a great title, again, of these books. And I know 49er fans would pretty much say they would want to know those things. So, Dan, thanks for calling.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My pleasure.
Tell our audience your background. And then, again, why you wrote the book and, your knowledge and background of the 49ers.
Yeah, I work for the San Jose Mercury News, covering a variety of sports, but it's been very 49ers specific over the past decade or so. So, writing about the Niners during some good times and some bad, I've gotten to know a lot of the players, a lot of the coaches, and having grown up in the Bay Area, I know their history. So when I got the call, if I would do this 100 things 49er fans should know and do, I was in kind of a pretty good position to reach back to different generations. You know, this is a franchise that started in 1946. So telling the story of the history of the franchise through the people who played it has been a really fun and rewarding experience.
And it's funny, if you read like the background, they talk about pretty much Montana on. There really wasn't a history before then, right?
Right. That's what, I'm 44, so a lot of fans of my generation think that the franchise started with the catch, with Montana to Dwight Clark in 1981. That's their first vivid football memory, and that's when a lot of 49er fans were born, was because of watching that big play. But before that happened, before Bill Walsh and Joe Montana really made the 49ers the franchise we know today, they still had a really storied history. There was no Super Bowl, there was no championship, but there were great players like Wyatt Tittle, Joe Perry, R.C. Owens, really iconic NFL names. So people should know those as well as, and not just start with 1981.
So let's go to YA, if you don't mind. I mean, I'm a definite historian in certain ways. So a lot of people finish their careers with the 49ers. It's kind of like, hey, this is my last shot, and I want to keep playing. And then YA decided to play for the 49ers?
Yeah, no, it was more the other way around. He had played a little bit in Baltimore, but ended up in San Francisco fairly early in his career. And he had a great connection with R.C. Owens, the on-field chemistry. The alley-oop that we now know as a basketball play started as a football play. It was Wyatt Tittle would kind of chuck it up there in the end zone, and R.C. Owens, who had a basketball background, would jump up, and he knew how to position his body in the air to, from his rebounding skills, he knew how to bump people out of the way and catch the ball and come down with a touchdown. So they called it the alley-oop play. And for as long as R.C. Owens lived, long after his playing career, people would greet him by saying, "Hey, Oop, how's it going, Oop?" As he started that play. And the Niners made the ill-advised decision to trade him to the New York Giants. And Wyatt Tittle went on to finish up a Hall of Fame career.
Wow, I didn't know that. So these are things that people, the 49ers fans, how many of them, if you would talk to them, especially with the book signings and stuff, Dan, knew about that YA played for them? Are they?
And YA still lives out in this area. So I've talked to him a few times just about his background. And the claim to fame for him and some others is the $1 million backfield, it was called. It's the only full house backfield where all 4 members ended up in the Hall of Fame. So it was Wyatt Tittle, Joe Perry, John Henry Johnson, R.C. Owens all end up in the Hall of Fame. So the $1 million backfield, it's called, even though in those days nobody made $1 million, not even all together.
So did they end up, did they ever win championships, NFL championships in that time, the 49ers?
No, they had a great shot in 1957. They had a huge lead over the Detroit Lions at halftime. And the lead looked so secure that they started printing up NFL championship tickets. They were going to face the Cleveland Browns in the 1957 title game. But the Niners let that lead slip away and ended up losing that game. And that was 1957. And that was the closest they got, and really until they made it in 1981.
Wow.
By the way, I should correct myself. I misspoke when I was listening to four guys. I said R.C. Owens. The other name I should have mentioned is Hugh McElhaney.
Okay.
He was the fourth guy from the $1 Million Backfield.
Well, trust me, I won't remember those times. And Dan, you're the historian and the writer, and this is your forte is the 49ers for sure. But let me tell you how I developed a love for the 49ers and then a hate for the 49ers. And then especially for our Pittsburgh flagship station, they would understand that fact of the of the hate of the 49ers. But I remember the 49ers at the time because I think this is when things are starting to get better for them. Or after, I guess you said they never really won anything. Steve DeBerg was quarterback of the 49ers, and I thought they had the coolest helmets. And that's why I started to like him and cheer for him. And no one gave him a chance those times. That was the 79, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was 6 years old. I have a pretty good memory. For one thing, I don't remember any of the teachers I've had in my whole career, and I'm a former teacher myself, but I remember Steve DeBerg. And it's because of Steve DeBerg's background, I think I was attracted to him. And how many people still remember remember Steve DeBerg and that fact of playing for the 49ers?
Well, they remember him because he was the transition quarterback, right? He was the last guy to hold down the fort before Montana arrived, and then Steve Young after him. And Steve Berg was not terrible. He was a pretty decent quarterback. He just wasn't Montana, and he wasn't Young. But to this day, Joe Montana credits Steve DeBerg for being a really good mentor, for being a guy who helped kind of show him the way a little bit. He was a good quarterback and went on to play pretty well elsewhere. He wasn't chopped liver, but the Niners franchise has come to be defined really by their quarterback play. A little bit before, Wyatt Tittle was great. John Brody was really good. Steve Young, and today Colin Kaepernick. They've got a pretty high bar set around here for quarterback play, and Steve Berg was only good. And around here, that hasn't been good enough.
Right. You have a bunch of big time players that have won Super Bowls. You can't put Steve DeBerg in that same category. And I think DeBerg went over and was the tutor of Doug Williams, if I'm correct, with Tampa, if I'm on the right track on that one. Or it was who I forget for sure. But again, we're talking to Dan Brown, author of 100 Things the 49ers fans should know before they die. It's a lot more than that. And it's so interesting. And right after that, you said the catch is probably what changed this franchise forever. Because, again, they were underdog against the Dallas Cowboys. And at that time, it was like that 1 year, like you remember so many NFL teams developing their final, that they finally are a competitor, and they get into this game, and no one thought they had a chance, right?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, at that time, Dallas was the America's team version, like the real dynasty, iconic Dallas Cowboys teams, and they still had a lot of the famous players that ended up in the Hall of Fame. But that moment, that 1981 game, ended up being a real transition point in terms of the powerhouse, top of the heap, because the Niners were on the rise and the Cowboys of that era were on the decline. It's a fun game to talk about as we head into that next Monday night's football game, because it's the last game ever at Candlestick Park.
Oh, wow.
Barring some improbable turn in the playoffs. But this is farewell to Candlestick Park. And for as crummy as that building is, and for as eager as people are to get rid of it, that's where the catch happened. And that little segment of grass in the end zone is where Dwight Clark managed to come down with the ball. So I think a lot of whatever nostalgia is going to be for that place on Monday night is going to be around those teams and that accomplishment, because that catch, with just a few seconds left against the Dallas Cowboys, represented the birth of a dynasty.
And if I'm correct in the history, and this is, again, I have no notes, I'm just going by memory, Dan, because, again, I'm just looking at each talking point. Say, I remember that. That's the year they played the Bengals in the Super Bowl, correct?
They played the Bengals in the Super Bowl, yes.
And that was, again, the Bengals year where they beat the San Diego Chargers in one of the coldest football games ever. That's true.
Yeah, and that game, the game itself, that first Super Bowl was most famous for a goal line stand, which is also in the book. But Dan Bunce, the linebacker, Ryan Lott, who was at that time just a young defensive back, they teamed up to help make, stop the Bengals when they were knocking on the door at a real key juncture in the game. That's how that Super Bowl is best remembered.
Exactly. And then the 49ers development. So talking about Montana, now you have, again, Montana and Young. Who do you think was the better quarterback? Do you still say it's Joe Montana, especially for our Pittsburgh audience out there? Do you think that it's Joe or Steve?
I think Joe, for as great as he was in the regular season, and he was great, Montana always jumped out to me because of what he did in the Super Bowl. He won 4 Super Bowls. He never threw an interception in the Super Bowl, which is incredible to me considering the top caliber defenses he was playing. And when they needed a big play, he made it. And going back to that second time they beat the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl, his pass to John Taylor with about 13 seconds left. It's like the ultimate Joe Montana moment. Trailing in the Super Bowl, down to 2 minutes, leading a score, and he just kind of calmly marches them downfield and makes the play and makes the throw. Not a lot of quarterbacks have gone unblemished the way he is, and his sterling Super Bowl record, I think, is what sets him apart.
It definitely does, and again, I forget this. Isn't that sad that they won 4 Super Bowls and then Young won 2? Am I correct? If I'm correct in the numbers, or only 1?
They won 5 Super Bowls because Joe won 4. Steve won 1, and then they lost last year's.
Yeah, that's right. So they were coming close to catching the Steelers, but that didn't happen. Okay, so isn't that kind of funny? You think about Steve Young winning more Super Bowls, but again, Young had some dominant teams when he played as well, and he definitely has to be in that conversation for sure. But Montana's wide receivers, when we talk about Jerry Rice, just unbelievable. One of the most dominant wide receivers ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think one of the fun things about this book, Roger Craig wrote the foreword, and he's a terrific guy, an optimistic guy. And you talk about the guys that Joe Montana used to throw to. Roger Craig was really the first running back to catch the ball a ton out of the backfield.
Right.
He led the NFC in receptions one year. He was a prototypical West Coast running back. And his contribution to the evolution of that position is not small, and he takes a lot of pride in it when he watches guys like Brian Westbrook or LaDainian Tomlinson or any of those running backs who catch the ball out of the backfield, because that was him, and that was Montana. And that's the way that offense worked. It wasn't always the big shot downfield. It wasn't always the rifle throws. It was just the little swing passes and dump-offs and short routes that would really frustrate opponents, but it would move chains, and that's what Montana was great at, was kind of orchestrating that little magic with whatever weapon he had. And Jerry Rice was the guy for the dagger. Jerry Rice was the guy for the long shot. But they were so balanced when they needed to be. That was really Bill Walsh's stamp, and that was really Roger Craig's stamp.
Okay, when we get back, we're going to talk more with Dan Brown, and I want to go into more of the research, but I have a couple more stories to discuss. And for a 49er fan or an NFL fan, they need to pick up the book, especially a 49ers fan. Before you die, you have to pick up that book. I had to bring up that little point. You're listening to Total Education Author's Corner, powered by the Simply G Media Network, and we'll be back in just a moment. We're back to Author's Corner in the Total Education Network, powered by the Simply G Media Network. Again, TotalTutor.net for more information. Twitter, Total Tutor, Neil S. Haley, Facebook, LinkedIn, Neil Haley, and also you can go to simplyg.com. And I'm with Dan Brown, author of 100 Things the 49ers Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. And Dan, it's such a short period of history to talk about from the catch to now, and how 49ers have such an unbelievable amount of Super Bowls and highlights and superstars during that time. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it was really a fascinating era, and it's kind of been revived under the Jim Harbaugh tenure. It was Super Bowl or bust. I mean, that was the mentality. If you went 13-3 but lost in the playoffs, that was a terrible season, because the bar was set at winning the Super Bowl. And every year, they found a way to do it. And with that, we talked about having Montana and Young as your key components certainly helps, but they set that bar way, way up there. And if you talk to the old Niners now, they can still recall the crushing feeling of losing an NFC title game, because while most teams might be happy to make it there, the Niners was, might as well throw away the season. They only made it that far.
And do you think also the pressure of San Francisco, especially when you think of the Bay Area and other famed teams. The San Francisco really didn't have. They had the Giants in baseball at times, but also they had across with the Oakland Athletics in all those winning seasons. That area is just, I guess, used to winning in times, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the knock on the Bay Area is a sports region is that it's soft, that the fans aren't as rabid here as they are other places, and the college football's never been huge out here, and Warriors, their legacy is not that huge when it comes to but the exception is the Niners. People are crazy, crazy nuts about the 49ers, and it's because of that generation of football with Rice and Montana and Steve Young, where the fans really were that nutty and that demanding, and that, Steve Young, they wanted him benched because he wasn't winning Super Bowls. I mean, there was vitriol towards him until he finally went and beat San Diego in the Super Bowl. But that's the exception with Bay Area sports fans is the Niners. Is people are as nutty about them as people are nutty about any team in the country. I should say one other fun thing about doing the book, because we keep mentioning Jerry Rice, but the book is also things to do. It's not just things to know. So out here in the Bay Area, Jerry Rice kind of made his fame a little bit by his really demanding workouts, and included his off-season workouts, where he was a lunatic with how hard he worked. And he would talk about this hill in the Bay Area where he would go run it, and he would bring Roger Craig and other guys, and they would race up this hill, and some guys would throw up, some guys would never come back, some guys couldn't make it. Well, I talked to Rice and I talked to Roger Craig about where it is and how to run it. So if fans want to stand in the footsteps of Jerry Rice, they can follow the directions to this hill and go try to run it like they did.
It's so interesting. So tell me some of those things, especially, like I said, I was looking at the press release and stuff on different things. I'm so focused on talking about the coaches. Like, we could talk, Dan, for probably more than 2 segments on such fantastic history. I mean, think about Bill Walsh, and I'm just jumping to him because he is just the architect in so many aspects. The ability that how he was able to win so many Super Bowls, and how it was just textbook. How the Niners would destroy people. That's why I couldn't stand them, because it was just it wasn't fun. They just literally destroyed teams. How much? And I'm a Bronco fan too, Dan. And how bad did they beat the Broncos in the Super Bowl? Oh, it was like,
oh gosh, 55-10.
Yes, that might be just something that I still am crying about. Maybe we could have the 49ers Broncos now, and then we could switch it around with Peyton Manning now. But
when I went to go write the book, right, you were listing out 1 to 100, and for me the catch was clearly number 1, because so many elements came into play there. You had the magic of Montana, you had the brilliance of Bill Walsh, you had a great player making a great time, the birth of the franchise, but then you go to number 2 on the list, and if you're going by people, by individuals, you can make a case for Joe Montana, you can make a case for Jerry Rice, you can make a case for Ronnie Lott. And I picked Bill Walsh because of the things you talked about. I mean, his blueprint for that team is still being copied, and his elevations are still being copied. And the thing that really kind of pushed it over the top for me was, whenever I talked to a player, regardless if they were a star or a role player or a rookie, they have a story about how Bill Walsh changed their career, how he saw something that nobody else did and managed to make the best of it. He was a guy who would switch people around positions, and he would find some clever way of utilizing a guy, even if it wasn't the most talented guy in the world, and somehow made him a contributor to a Super Bowl team. There's a guy named Bill Ring, super small guy, couldn't play linebacker, but he found his niche as a special teams ace, and he tried out for a bunch of other teams, and Bill Walsh is the only guy who said, hey, you can make it with us. You fit our style.
Yes.
And there are hundreds of stories about that, because Walsh was that kind of coach.
There's only a few ever out there that, coaching is what made that success. And then George Seifert has to kind of live under, the microscope or the shadow of Bill Walsh, but he was a winner too. Anyone that's won a Super Bowl is a winner, and he had some dominant teams as well. They just didn't win.
Teams, yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Walsh's shadow was so large that George Seifert won 2 Super Bowls, but has not gotten within a whiff of, it has an incredible winning percentage, not a whiff of Hall of Fame consideration, because people in their minds still think, well, those were from what Bill Walsh left behind. it wasn't because of what Seifert did, it's because of what Walsh left behind.
Yeah.
Seifert was a great coach. He didn't win elsewhere. I think that was another knock against him. But with the Niners, he was his own guy.
And I know also it's helping the book, the success of the book, because you have, if the 49ers weren't winning, it'd be much harder to push the book. But again, getting Jim Harbaugh and having the 49ers success, and they're still playing pretty well this year compared to going to a Super Bowl, and the 49ers are back. And I'm sure that gets the younger fans into seeing the history when they pick up this book as well.
Yeah, it's almost, Jim Harbaugh, when he was hired, at the time, he said, look, I keep a photograph of Bill Walsh taped to my computer in my office. I mean, he's really influenced by him and really admires him. But this new generation of stars, Vernon Davis, Colin Kaepernick, they play with a lot of flash, and they play with a lot of, electricity in the stadium, and I think that really has helped win over a new generation of fans. And then Frank Gore, who doesn't play with flash, but has been about as steady as they come for about a decade, has made this a pretty intriguing mix. And I think fans are, they are about as crazy about this team as they were of the '80s version, because a little bit is being replayed. The bar again is being set at the Super Bowl or bust. Last year when the Niners lost the Super Bowl, it was heartbreak city around here.
So when you cover the team in certain ways, are you a fan of the team? Or would you say you take the business of being of covering the team as that's the part of it? Or are you a fan?
Yeah, no, I would say I'm not a fan of the team. I take it more of a, I'm an observer of the team, and I appreciate the history and I appreciate the legacy, but I no rooting interest at all.
What about, is that because of San Jose, or were you another NFL fan before that? Before the 49ers? Oh, no, I kind of grew up a bandwagon jumper. I was an Eagles fan for a while, and I was a Raiders fan for a while, and, depending on the mix of the team, I'll like different teams. I was not a loyalist by any means, but, so that's actually kind of made it easier a little bit. It makes it easier to cover a team, right, when you're watching from just a witness observer standpoint. And also in writing this book, it's not about me. It's not about my personal rooting interest. It's about the 49ers history and what some of these various individuals have meant to not just for 49er fans, but for the evolution of the NFL. Yes. The Niners are one of the marquee franchises. The West Coast offense came from the 49ers.
Right.
And I guess that led to the no huddle in certain ways. The West Coast was, who needs a running game of 150 yards? You could throw the ball, and when you run second, you pass first.
Yeah, and Bill Walsh would be the first to point out that he took a lot from Paul Brown, who was one of his earliest mentors. So Walsh didn't invent all this stuff. Paul Brown helped nudge these innovations along the way, and he was a real guy who changed the NFL too. Walsh, I think, just had some better weapons, although that's not the right word. He had a lot of talent to work with, and he threw in some new wrinkles that made it distinctly 49ers. I mean, when Mike Singletary took over the Niners coach, I asked him, what was it like to face those old Niners teams? And he said it was frustrating, maddening beyond belief, because at that time they were accustomed to hard-nosed football, the downfield shots, the vertical game, and the power running game. So to have for lack of a better word, a finesse team come at you, they weren't used to that, and it drove them absolutely crazy.
Interesting. And Dan, what has been the response of the fans, of 49ers fans, about the book so far?
They really like it. We're kind of bracing for a lot of complaints about omissions or rankings, and no, they like it. I mean, people really like The Hill because they've heard about Jerry Rice talk about that, and I think they really like getting to know the 1950s Niners and the 1960s Niners, who kind of laid the foundation for what was to come. So, there are a couple guys in the book that personally, already, if I could rewrite it, I think Frank Gore should be higher. He's added another 1,000-yard season, and I think his contribution in good times and bad, he's now the Niners' all-time leading rusher. He's going to be their all-time leading TD rusher. He has been the face of a franchise for a long time. So when I do the sequel, he's getting moved up
You definitely will be back when you do the sequel for sure. And I'm going to start. It's kind of funny now. I'm watching these sports and I'm saying, man, I got to start studying this history so that when I get some real history about teams I have no idea about, I got to start researching just because I'm such a sports nut in so many ways. But Dan, where can we purchase the book and also learn more about you?
Well, you can purchase. They're available on Amazon.com. Or if you want the more personal touch, send me an email, dbrown@mercurynews.com. That's as in San Jose Mercury News, but dbrown@mercurynews.com, and I can send you a copy, or the Amazon.com has plenty of copies available as well.
Well, awesome, Dan. I enjoyed the conversation and really interesting about the 49ers. Like I said, we could talk about so many things, but people got to buy the book. That's why I like to take a different direction and go different ways, because people are intrigued now. They have to find out those 100 things by going to Amazon right now or to email you to purchase that book. And that's the key thing in this, because there's so much history about the 49ers, and also know about the 49ers. Hey, when I go visit San Francisco, I'm going to have to visit that hill, see if I can tackle it.
Come on out. Come on out.
Exactly. So take care, Dan, and we'll be in touch for another book to talk to you again, okay?
Okay, thanks so much.
All right, take care. Okay, bye-bye. You're listening to Author's Corner, and we'll be back in just a moment.